Immediately seizing central territory, white dictates the opening's initial flow and prepares for pawn advances. Developing a knight to f6 immediately controls central squares and prepares for pawn advances. Developing the knight to f3 shores up the center and prepares for kingside castling, a solid foundational principle. Embracing sharp central tension, black immediately challenges white's pawn structure and opens avenues for counterplay. Pushing the pawn gains space, but can also solidify black's central control if not met with precise follow-up. Instigating a fianchetto, this pawn push aims to secure a strong outpost for the bishop on the long diagonal. Solidifying the central pawn chain, this development aims to exploit black's potentially weakened kingside. Black solidifies the fianchettoed bishop, preparing to challenge the center's pawn wall and potentially eyeing the kingside. Asserting central dominance, this pawn thrust boldly stakes a claim, aiming to restrict black's developing pieces and seize initiative. Securing the monarch instantly preempts immediate threats and prepares for central pawn battles. Solidifying the center, white prepares to connect rooks and potentially launch queenside expansion. Solidifying the central pawn structure, black reinforces their kingside space and prepares for potential pawn advances, a crucial step in this complex pawn chain scenario. Anchoring the center further solidifies white's pawn mass, preparing for a central pawn thrust or potential kingside expansion. Developing the bishop to pin the knight disrupts white's kingside harmony, creating immediate tactical possibilities. Instantly challenges the bishop's aggressive pinning influence, aiming to untangle white's pieces and potentially open the e-file for pressure. The knight's repositioning opens pathways for queenside counterplay and challenges white's central dominance by eyeing potential outpost squares. Fortifying the knight on c3 to support a future c4 push, while also preparing to redeploy to a more active square. Exchanging the bishop simplifies things, opening lines and allowing the queen to develop more actively. Unlocking the queen offers central influence and prepares for pawn breaks, but temporarily leaves the kingside slightly less defended. Gauging the bishop's strength, black forces a decision on the g5 square, anticipating a potential outpost on d5. Preserving the bishop pair is a key consideration here, aiming to outmaneuver black's pieces. Connecting the queen to the kingside defense now prepares for potential counterplay on the queenside or a central pawn push. Concentrating forces on the d-file prepares for central expansion and potential pressure against black's king. Reuniting the rooks on the e-file aims to bolster central influence and prepare for potential pawn advances, but it leaves the queenside slightly exposed. Asserting dominance on the queenside, white aims to restrict black's maneuvering space and prepare a potential pawn storm. Unclogging the queenside, the knight seeks better squares, potentially eyeing d5 or even e6 for a central outpost. Asserting control over the d6 square with the knight creates pressure and limits black's central options. Injecting immediate pressure, black aims to exploit white's undeveloped queenside and potentially create imbalances. Exchanges the bishop for a knight, aiming to disrupt black's pawn structure and potentially create weaknesses on the dark squares. Accepting the queen trade consolidates black's pawn structure, creating a symmetrical but potentially passive position where maneuvering will be key. Doubling pawns on the e-file disrupts black's development and creates a structural weakness that white can exploit later. This exchange clarifies the pawn structure and prepares for a potential queenside expansion by black. Broadening white's pawn front aims to seize the initiative and create attacking opportunities on the kingside. Consolidating the rook on the open d-file allows black to prepare for potential central pawn breaks and improve coordination. Aggressively pushing the e-pawn seizes central space, aiming to restrict black's pieces and open diagonals for white's bishops. Reclaiming the bishop's diagonal strengthens the kingside defense. Reinforcing the central knights is a sound, if unexciting, regrouping to shore up weak pawns and prepare for potential pawn pushes. Sensing initiative, black aims to secure queenside space and restrict white's knight. opening a path for the b-pawn and pressuring black's queenside. This advance subtly expands white's influence and prepares for potential pawn pushes. The knight's maneuver to b5 aggressively challenges white's pawn structure on the queenside, seeking outpost opportunities and disrupting piece harmony. Exploring the queenside with the knight aims to establish a strong outpost. Aggressive pawn thrusts open critical lines, potentially exposing your monarch to a fierce assault while offering fascinating tactical possibilities. Gaining space and fortifying the kingside, this maneuver aims to stabilize white's pawn structure before black can exploit any lingering weaknesses. Opening the g-file is a bold but potentially precarious decision, exposing your king's defenses to further scrutiny. Opening the g-file is a double-edged sword, creating attacking chances but exposing your own king. The king steps into a slightly safer square, escaping the immediate pressure and preparing for potential pawn advances. Reinforcing the queenside pawn structure solidifies white's space and prepares potential expansion. Unlocking the kingside pawn structure could lead to a dangerous initiative, but it also exposes the monarch to potential threats. Unleashing a pawn outpost here secures a lasting outpost and cramps black's queenside coordination. Initiating a pawn storm on the kingside signals aggressive intent, aiming to pry open lines for attack. Securing the king amidst the growing pawn storm on the kingside demands vigilance. Relocating the knight to c7 intends to contest the d5 pawn and potentially establish a more active outpost for the piece. Establishing a knight outpost on e3, eyeing weak pawns and potentially creating outposts for other pieces. Rerouting the knight aims to pressure the queenside pawns, but it surrenders central control for now. Seizing control of the central files, white prepares to unleash a decisive attack on black's exposed king. Preparing to contest the open e-file, black reroutes their rook, aiming for active piece play despite the cramped queenside. Shifting the king to safety unlocks potential piece activity for white. Repositioning the bishop to the queenside aims to bolster the kingside pawn structure, anticipating pawn advances. Consolidating the queenside pawn structure solidifies white's central control and prepares for potential pawn advances. Reclaiming the b-file for potential counterplay, black aims to stir things up on the queenside. This redeployment aims to secure the c4 square and prepare to challenge black's cramped position, potentially targeting the weak e6 pawn. The king ventures out, seeking safer squares amidst the pawn storm brewing on the kingside. The king's exposed square is now under serious threat, demanding immediate attention. Retreating the king allows the rook to potentially join the attack along the g-file, but it's a passive defensive posture. The rook sacrifice finally breaks open the king's sanctuary, paving the way for immediate tactical onslaught. Confronting the exposed monarch, black's king ventures out, seeking sanctuary amidst the looming offensive. Unleashing the king begins the endgame push, but watch for those open files to become a problem. Restoring king safety proves paramount after the central exchange. The king's promenade offers little immediate counterplay to white's active pieces. Unleashing the king into this open expanse immediately creates an existential threat for black's monarch.